So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Impact Nomic with Desmond Situma. Today, once again, we are joined by Jacob Kasule. As you remember, a couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation about faith-based approach to development, and we are glad to meet Jacob once again. Jacob, welcome to Impact Nomic.
Thank you.
Today's conversation will be more on Uganda, a
Yes,
country that is known
yes.
as the Pearl of
The
Africa.
Pearl of Africa,
Why is
indeed.
it called the Pearl of Africa?
Well, when you look at the beautiful scenery, the
Mm-hmm.
rich weather, the rich culture,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that it's all green
Mm-hmm.
every season of the year, and the fact that it's agriculturally rich
Mm-hmm.
in the land, in a way, the potential that Uganda has
Yeah.
agriculture-wise, if it was fully tapped,
Mm-hmm.
Uganda would be able to feed the entire Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that alone qualifies it, not
Mm-hmm.
to be the Pearl of Africa, not to mention the different bird species and the
Yeah.
different wild animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, having almost the big five of
Yeah.
the animals,
Mm-hmm.
not just in one park in Uganda, but at least almost like in three different parks in the country. All of
Mm-hmm.
that makes it rich.
I strongly agree with
Yeah,
you. And actually, one interesting fact I learned yesterday when we were visiting
yeah.
the source of the Nile.
Which I should say first, before you finish it, I
Yeah.
should say welcome to Uganda.
Thank you.
And I know some of our friends who are
Mm-hmm.
watching this are probably dealing with winter right now
Oh, yeah.
in Europe, in the US. And so
Mm-hmm.
please, in case it gets too cold in the winter, come to Uganda. I think you can tell
Mm-hmm.
our dressing today is different from how it was
Yeah.
before when we were in the winter, the
Indeed.
previous one.
And today is, when is today? The 6th of
Today's the
January,
6th of January,
2024.
which it should be very cold now.
And Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Please, you are
Yeah.
saying, talking about
Yes, I
your
was I was just
experience at the
emphasizing the
Nile.
point you were making
Yes.
about the rich diversity in terms of culture, in
Yes.
terms of wildlife.
Yes.
And an interesting fact I knew yesterday from a guide at the source of the Nile,
Mhm.
the River Nile is sourced in Uganda. That's where the
Yes.
origin is.
Yes.
So we went yesterday to that source, and I was told that Uganda has the second most bird species in Africa,
Yes, it is.
second
Second
to
to
South
South
Africa.
Africa. Yes,
That's very interesting.
it is. So there's a lot to
Mhm.
see in Uganda, to experience in Uganda. So it, it's rich.
Wow,
And the only way you'll be able to tell is by coming.
indeed.
Yeah.
And it's a very green Africa because I come from Kenya,
Yeah.
and I've realized Uganda is greener than Kenya.
It is.
Uganda is more food sufficient
Yes.
than Kenya. You don't hear hunger problems. Of course, there have been cases of droughts, climate
Yes, that,
change,
yeah.
and so on and so forth. But still, Uganda feeds. I think, like you said, Uganda could feed the whole of
It
Africa.
could feed the whole of Africa.
Uh-huh.
At least right now, almost the entire East African region, in a
Yes.
way, one way or another, somehow imports their food from Uganda,
From
in
Uganda.
one way or another, whether they're talking about Sudan or South Sudan or
Uh-huh.
Congo or Kenya. Well, of course, there's this business, and
Yeah.
Tanzania, there's where they're taking some things from us, we're getting some like rice from them, and
Mhm.
just and we're getting rice, for example, from Tanzania, not because we don't have rice, but just we want to test how the Tanzanian rice feels and
Yeah.
tastes compared to the different varieties we grow in Uganda.
Mhm,
But so yeah, so things like that.
Talking about Tanzania, Kenya, this forms part of the East African community.
The original
Yeah.
three East African community.
Do you think there will be a day when this region will really be integrated? Because when I was coming to Uganda, by the way, we are filming this interview in Jinja,
Uganda.
uh, a port city in Uganda.
Right by at the background, you can look at
At
the
the
river. That
background,
is part of the Nile
if our
River.
camera person can show you, you will see the River Nile behind
The
us.
Nile River is
down
right
there.
there.
Yeah.
Yes, at the back.
So I had some problems at the border.
Yes.
And then when I look at the regional integration index in Africa, the East African community scores the highest in terms of integration.
Yes.
But so I was shocked to find that still there's a lot of checks and checks at the border.
Yes.
What is the governance problem that we have?
Well, I think one of the biggest problem, there are many, but one of the biggest problem is we have taken the community integration, the East African community integration, more just for professional purposes
Yeah.
in document, where at least for regional basing, at least we say this is East African region and these are the countries that make it. But as far as implementations and the policies that should prove that there's actually an actual integration, it's not
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
But this, I think, is sad that we've allowed the demarcation of boundaries that was done in the 1800s by powers that be sitting in Europe, dividing Africa for monetary value, not because they really loved Africa,
Yeah.
and kind of it was almost like sharing a cake, and like, okay, this is my cake
Yeah.
and that is your cake and this is mine. And so that's how Uganda became a British protectorate and Kenya was, and Tanzania at first was German, and then later on in a way became under Britain, and then Congo was under the Belgian, and
Yeah.
you can trace all the way through the different African countries.
Yeah.
And so these boundaries were created not for our good. It was for control and management by the powers that were colonizing Africa at the time. Unfortunately, at least 60 or so years later, after the different independence that at least African countries have had, we have not gotten rid of those boundaries that was created.
Yeah.
And with it, now imagine you are a Ugandan, or in this case, a Kenyan. You're under East African community, but you cannot freely move and come to Uganda, or vice versa. I cannot freely just go and cross Tanzania or go to Rwanda or Burundi without having to go through interviews and checks and all of those things, and pay this and pay that and bring this and produce this. And sometimes you even ask, what are you doing here?
Yeah. They ask
How
where
long?
are you going and
Where
why?
are you from? Where are you going?
Yeah.
How long are you going to be here? This is home. In Europe, a European is not going to be asked if they're crossing from Germany going to France, how long are you going to be here? Where are you going? Why are you coming here?
Yeah, actually, I've traveled across Europe. It's very easy to move around. And it's not like as Africans we want to be like Europe, but the irony is the people who demarcated our borders don't have these borders anymore in terms of free movement of people.
Yes.
But we who claim to have regained our independence, we maintain the borders. We don't allow our brothers and sisters to move freely.
Yes. Yes.
But do you see a possibility of removing these borders?
Well, I would say whether there's possibility or not, the only hope that Africa has is removing these borders. Whether we're talking about economic integration, we're talking about being able to have a strong voice in the world market, being able to do business within Africa, which I've already said now, Africa has a population of at least close to 1.4 billion people now.
Yeah.
But we and Africa in general, except for the Sahara desert area, most part of Africa is actually agricultural, cultivatable land. And so look at how can it be that we're 1.4 billion and we can't feed ourselves, and we can't easily do business with among ourselves, and yet we're growing all of this and having all of this, and then we cry there's no market for our produce and what we have. Why? Because I cannot easily just cross to Kenya and sell something as a Ugandan without having to deal with all the bureaucratic system. So I think that's really the only way is we need to remove these barriers and boundaries. Imagine to go to Zambia, which if I was to 2 hours, I need a visa. Seriously. I'm an African going to an African country where if the dialect is very close, that a lot of words I would hear if a Malawian, for example, is speaking, but I have to get a visa.
And by the way, another thing also, other than the visa, you need to change your currency.
And you need to change the currency. That is sad. How can it be in Africa that we have at least over 32 different currencies? That is not acceptable in any.
But there have been proposals on using a single currency. For example, this is more regionally. Like the
Yes.
ECOWAS community, the Economic Community of West African
Yes.
States, had a proposition to use the ECO
Hmm.
as the West African currency, but that has taken years. So we see some very interesting policies being formulated, but the implementation is lacking.
It is. I would want to quote something that Professor Pilo Lumumba said.
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
said the problem with Africa is we're good at starting something and we
Hmm.
don't follow through with it.
Yeah.
As far as coming up, designing new policies and coming up with new ideas, and
Hmm.
we need to do this and need to do this, which would be good for Africa as a continent.
Hmm.
There's been several
Yeah. Yeah.
right from the 80s.
Hmm.
It actually can go all the way right from 1963 with Ghana's independence and following through with Kwame Nkrumah's
Hmm.
different policies and ideas and advice, and then Julius Kambaraga Nyerere coming with different. There's been this and that and all through, but none of those policies, none of those ideas has ever been implemented because somehow we are content with fighting for individual breadcrumb
Yeah. Yeah.
than fight for the continental cake and make it one. And I want to say this.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
See, unfortunately, here in Africa, we are so concerned with, no, you're a Kenyan, I'm a Ugandan, you're a Tanzanian, you're Rwandese, you're a Congolese, and all of that. Outside the bound of the African continent, the rest of the world don't know Kenya or Uganda or Tanzanian or South African, or they know Africa.
But I've been following some things on the internet, and
Yeah.
actually I've had people saying that the capital of Africa is Nairobi.
Mm.
A lot of let's say people in Europe or
Yeah.
the Americas and Asia, when you ask them what is the capital of Africa,
Yeah.
many people think Africa is a country.
Exactly. They think Africa is a country.
And is that a good thing or bad thing? Because the
Well,
way you're explaining that Africa has to be united, right?
so I would say that thought is, even though it already shows how disinterested the rest of the world is in Africa, in knowing really what Africa is like and what makes it, at least we can take that and use it as a ground for why we should be united,
Yeah.
why we should have one currency and do an actual economic integration and have open borders
Yeah, yeah.
so that you can fly from Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, and go all the way to South Africa without having to change your currency 4, 5, 6 times, and without having to get visas 3, 4, 5 different times, and all of that. That you can just go and you're home. That no one is going to ask you,
Yeah.
where are you from and why are you here and how long are you going to take here. So because since the world think Africa is just a country, why can't we take that and then use it as a ground, for example, to begin having a continental negotiation in the global market? We are negotiating as Africa, not as Uganda. Because as Uganda, if we go and we're 46-ish million people, what voice do we have?
Very small one.
But if Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, Sudan, South Sudan, and Ethiopia, if they join, and because they've already shown interest in wanting to become part of this African community, that there at least we're already 3-ish plus close to 400 million people. So put that and put Nigeria alone is over 200 million people, right? Now, so if we're speaking with one voice, represented by 1 or 2 people representing the voice of 1.4 billion people, that the world is going to listen. But if it is a person representing 40 million people, 30 million people, even if it's like, what are you? And the problem is, if Uganda is to say, no, we can't do this, and then the other one with 70 million people says it is okay, they will go with the 70 million. You can.
Yeah.
So that, I would say, it's not just something that is necessary. It must be the only hope we have.
Yeah. Interesting. what I'm seeing in terms of organization of Africa as
Hmm.
a single economic community, for example,
Yeah.
is the proposition of an African a common market for Africa.
Hmm.
And I think like 2 years ago, from 2021,
Yeah.
they launched or they rather inaugurated the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Yes.
But they are still negotiating rules of origin and that
Mm.
and that. So in practice, it hasn't been fully
Not
implemented
not
yet.
implemented yet.
Do
Yes.
you see the possibility of this single block or free trade
Well,
area to
if
be something that will be possible?
if the leaders who are involved now continues intentionally
Hmm.
pursuing it,
Yeah.
and this time with the love for Africa
Hmm.
in mind, that we're doing this for Africa, not just for my country,
Mm.
not just for our region. If they, all of the leaders involved, continues with that mind, then yes, we'll get there. But the
Hmm.
moment we begin thinking more about personal gain, individual gain, or individual nations gain, then we're not going to make it.
But what is your personal assessment in terms of the quality of leadership? Do you think the current leadership in Africa is leading us towards the achieving the goals set in the Africa
Yeah.
Continental Free Trade
Well,
Area?
at least now I'd say there are individual leaders who are
Hmm.
beginning to rise up
Hmm.
and speak not just for their country alone,
Hmm.
but speak with a voice for Africa.
Yeah.
There are at least now leaders like that.
Hmm.
And I applaud them, but I would say we need to get to where all the African presidents, at least at this point, since we don't have the integration and a one nation, one continent, and all of that yet, that if all the African leaders would begin thinking long term,
Hmm.
there would be something good. But the problem, again, I want to just make reference to PLO Lumumba. I love it. I love him. He says, and he quotes actually Chinua Achebe's writing, and in Chinua Achebe's writing, he says the problem with Africa is one,
Hmm.
that of leadership.
Yeah.
And then Pirlo makes this comment, and the problem is African leadership are primarily politicians,
Hmm.
not statesmen.
Okay. And what's the difference?
Politicians look forward to the next election.
Ah,
Statesmen looks towards national development and raising and developing with other leaders, setting up a legacy.
mhm.
Politicians are looking for the next election. And so if my mind is just trapped to, so for example, let's say in Uganda, our next election is in 2 years, 2026. So if that's all I'm thinking about, then that means I'm going to be willing to do everything it takes for me to be in power 2026.
Mhm.
I don't care who is hurt along the way. But also, then the moment I begin seeing that the odds are against me, then I don't care what happens to the nation because I know come 2026, I'm not there anymore.
Mhm.
A statement would look beyond me.
Yeah.
A statement would say, whether I lead or not, this nation needs to continue. This policy should be in place because then the next generation will be fine. And majority of African leaders are not statesmen, they're politicians. And
Mhm.
we need statesmen.
Okay, Jacob, that's a good explanation, but I
Mhm.
have this question. You talk
Okay.
about leadership
Yes.
and elections,
Yes.
which means there are people who elect these leaders.
Hmm. Yes,
Okay?
they are.
So is the problem the leader or the person who elects the leader? Because if you elect a leader who doesn't perform,
Yeah.
and then again after maybe 5 or 6 years you re-elect them,
Yes.
who is the problem?
Well, I would say in this case it is both.
Uh-huh.
We as the electorate, the people who vote these people into office,
Mhm.
we have equal responsibility. And if there's a blame to be given, we definitely need to blame ourselves as well. And unfortunately, because of the system that has, in a way, become a norm,
Mhm.
which shouldn't be. It's not. We have embraced a norm that should not be normal,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that is, as far as the politicians are concerned and the election time is concerned, we are now more about what we can get in the process of the campaign
Mhm.
and not look at the development or lack of development that will follow based on the person we're sending in the office.
Are you talking about the handouts that politicians
Those
give?
handouts that
Ah,
politicians
okay.
give. And so we are then have become accustomed to, and that is what we use to evaluate and decide on a vote, who will get my vote, is what handout did I get from this person? And we're not looking at, okay, this person is going to give me a handout worth less than $10. But then my future and the future of my children, at least for the next 5 years, is in their hand. Because they are the policy makers. They are supposed to represent us in the national governance. They're supposed to present our problems and bring it for table it for discussion, for example, in the parliament, ensure that my constituency and my people are dealing with this and facing this and all of that, and therefore something needs to be done. We don't look at that. And then when nothing is happening, unfortunately, we're not blaming ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not blaming the person we voted in. We're blaming the president.
Ah, okay. Yeah. You talked a lot about leadership, and I want to transition a bit, um, because we have leaders. Some of them were elected in good faith.
Yes.
They seem to be very good people.
Yes.
They promise very, very interesting things.
Yes.
But something happens, and then they kind of become the same like the others. And one of the perceptions out there, or one of the conversations going on, is there is a lot of external interference in terms of governance in Africa, perhaps from European powers, from America, from perhaps Asia, China, and many other places. Because I will also refer to Professor Pilo.
Yes.
Let's take an example of a country like Congo. Very rich culturally, biodiversity, mineral resources,
mineral wealth, yes,
but also with a lot of conflict. And PLO says Congo has the busiest airspace.
It does.
Because there's a lot of planes flying in and out, just to take out these minerals. And I hear a lot of reference to the conflicts in Congo and among other countries as well.
Yes.
That those are not local conflicts. They are manufactured by someone else. Yes. Are these conversations true, or they're just myths?
Well, so when Africa was scrambled for in the 1800s, and the colonization happened, and I mentioned already before that the reason for the scramble and partition of Africa was not because the colonial powers really loved Africa and Africans, and therefore wanted to design something that is good for them. It was more about keeping control and dominance so that there is no conflict among the colonial powers, so that there's clear boundaries. Okay, as Britain, these are your territories. So whatever you want to do, you do it here. As Germany, these are your territories. As France, these are your territories. And you can name all of those, Portugal and all of that. Right? And so the Industrial Revolution and all of the need for natural resources and labor and market and all of those many, many reasons that made the West come to Africa to colonize it, those things have not changed. The fact that African countries were granted independence, the independence we were granted was in some ways some level of direct political influence, not total political independence. But also, you cannot truly have independence when you don't have economic independence. And we don't have economic independence as Africa.
So we are not economically free.
So we are not economically free, then that means we cannot politically be free, because we need money and finance to run the economy, to run the government, and all of those things. So now, the reason why Africa was scrambled for and partitioned and the colonial things happened, those things have not stopped. The West still needs the natural resources that Africa has, still needs the wealth that Africa has, the market that Africa offers, then the free and cheap, or the free or cheap labor that Africa offers, and you can name it. That in it's just continued, the need has just continued to grow. And so this with it, not a willingness to really sit on the table as business partners and say, you have these resources we need, we have these resources or these services that you need, can we do some business together? The West is not willing to do that. And so what is happening, they still want to be able to get the resources we have, but without really having to either pay for it or give what is really valuable.
On that note, Jacob, we are the ones with the resources.
We are.
Why don't we negotiate for a better deal? Where is the problem?
The problem is we have unfortunately embraced this racial and cultural superiority and this false notion that as African, there's nothing good we can do for ourselves. That anything good must come from the West. That unfortunately, we still many people still think like that. And so because we still think only good things come from the West, we cannot do anything by ourselves. And then our leaders not really being willing to work together and just looking forward to the next election and what I can gain for myself when I'm in power, and therefore there's no love for the people. We cannot then really get into the world market and bargain. That's why you'll notice, for example, China will have one representative, but that one representative is able to summon all the 54 or 55 heads of states in Africa, and all of them will go for negotiation.
We'll fly out to go
Well,
to China.
imagine 54 sovereign heads of states going to meet one person.
Why doesn't
can't we
the
send
Ugandan
one?
president, for example, invite all European presidents to Uganda?
They'll never come.
Why?
And again, you notice if an African leader does that, it's not even going to make sense. It's not even going to be treated as anything valuable. And we allow it because somehow we think they're better. The mindset is the biggest thing that need to change.
Talking about other governments,
Yes.
there are institutions, for example, the World Bank, the IMF,
Yeah.
the European Investment Bank, and many, many others.
Yes.
Do you think these institutions are good for Africa? Because many of our governments owe them money.
Well, unfortunately, those institutions, even if the reason why they were set up in the first place, on paper, looks good. When you read it, it looks good. It was supposed to be for development and supporting other nations and making sure that there will be funds available that you can be borrowed and for development and things like that. Unfortunately, at the point we have reached, it has become a tool that is being used by foreign powers to control Africa.
Because many of our African countries are in very bad debts.
In huge debts.
And I've seen a lot of, I'm Kenyan, for example.
Yeah.
I know we owe a lot
Yes.
of money to perhaps private institutions, but also these multilateral lenders,
Yes.
like the IMF, World Bank, and
Yes.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing in Kenya, or what I hear people say in Kenya, is that there has been a lot of tax increase.
Yes.
And it's becoming a very big burden on individuals, on businesses, on organizations. And the cost of living is going so high.
It is.
Yeah. And there is a blame that is being directed to these multilateral financiers, that they are pushing our governments to implement austerity measures, so that they seem to be credit worthy, so that they can get more loans. Unfortunately, do you think this is a sustainable trend in terms of building our economies?
Getting more loans is not the way to go. And of course, I recognize that many of our African countries still are not now, as far as their GDP is concerned, they're not able to raise all the taxes
Yeah.
that would raise then the funds that is needed to run the economy,
Mhm.
every financial year. So in a way, we still need to rely on either foreign aid or get loans.
Mhm.
But I would say the where we get the loans, the how and the when, all of those are also important. And unfortunately, like now, you've seen what, for example, IMF and World Bank and all of that is doing. They are beginning to give loans are now being given with strings attached, with conditions. And that's not how loans are supposed to be.
Mhm.
So, for example, if I needed a loan from you, all that you're supposed to be concerned is okay, how much, what will be the terms of payment, and okay, at what percentage, as far as
The
all of the
interest.
interest is concerned, how is it going to be, and how long will you be able to pay this, in which time frame, and all of that. That should be your concern, and then if we can agree, then that we make the deal. But now it's getting to where I come for a loan to you, and then you begin saying, now I want you to, if I'm going to give you the loan you want, but this money that you'll get from me or from our firm
Yeah.
can only be used for this, and nothing beyond.
And you have to do this and
And
that
then you have to do
to
this and
qualify.
do this
Yeah.
and do this before we can give it to you. So now there, it's no longer a loan, because now you're controlling what I do. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that means whatever interest you have in my home, that is where you're going to direct the money to be invested in, not what is actually good for me. And that's now what's happening, that these foreign entities are controlling nations indirectly that way, that the areas where they say the investment is supposed to happen are areas of their interests, not what actually is good for the country. Then, of course, unfortunately, we have corrupt leaders, and that is not news in Africa. And we get loans before we're ready for it.
Yeah.
We make deals with before knowing what we're going to use the money for. And so we come and say, oh, we need to make this road. It's going to be a stretch of 100 kilometers. It's going to take 10 trillion shillings. And so, okay, where can we get it from? Well, we can get it from Desmond and Family Company Limited. And so we come and make the contract. Okay, so we're getting this loan. How much? We need 10 trillion shillings. And so this 10 trillion shillings, when do you need it? We need it next year. We need it at the end of 2024. Okay, and when will you begin paying it back? Well, 2027. At least we'll start paying it back. No problem. We make the deal. And so with this, you're actually not even going to give all of those conditions of first do this, but then there's interest.
Yeah.
And so we get the loan. But we've not yet done the planning, the consultation, the contraction, awarding the contract to whichever companies, all of that. Then 2024 will pass.
Yeah.
But as far as Desmond and Family Company business entity is concerned, you're counting down
The
already.
days. Yeah.
2025 passes. 2026, we begin doing consultative meetings.
Yeah.
2027, we now have some companies, construction companies, that have shown interest, they're bidding. We're already supposed to begin paying back the loan. We've not yet started the work.
Yeah.
And so 2029, finally, we have approved the construction company 3 years into past when we were supposed to pay everything back. Then we're back to, okay, can we renegotiate? We've already paid half, more than half of what we had requested with nothing. Now we need 10 trillion again. So all of those things also, where we are having people who are poor at making policies and poor at planning and rushing to make decisions without and before really considering everything. That itself is also one of the reasons why we are having issues within the economy.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Still on the same, you mentioned that there are strings attached
Yes.
to some of these finances. And Uganda is one of the very interesting countries that is lately in the news about,
Yes.
claiming that there are strings attached. And there have been accusations on Uganda,
Yeah.
Ugandan government, that is,
Hmm.
that it has been violating human rights.
Okay.
That is mostly according to America, to
Yeah.
the EU.
Hmm.
So there have been propositions to sanction Uganda,
Yes.
and some sanctions are
Some
already
sanctions have
actually,
happened.
yeah.
Yes.
And one of the things that are bringing this concern is the LGBT law that was passed by the Ugandan parliament.
Yes.
Do you think this is a good thing to do in the name of human rights,
Well,
or you think Europe has its other agenda?
it is. I would say it's other agenda.
Mhm,
Well, one, they, the West really wants Uganda's oil, and two,
mhm,
you know, if you followed the media at least 2 years ago or thereabout, there's
mhm,
one of the largest gold deposit in the country, in the world, found
mhm,
in Uganda. And so there's been all of these multinational companies coming, please give us this right to mine and allow us that, and then give us this and give us that. And then the president not agreeing with the terms they're trying to set.
yeah.
Okay. So now when we talk about human rights, which human right are we talking about?
Mhm,
Because when we talk about human right and morals, shouldn't it be, for example, if 45-ish million people
mhm,
say, this is what we want for ourselves,
mhm,
this is our culture, this is what we want to maintain.
mhm.
So for us, as far as this is what we feel is right, don't they also have their right to decide what is morally wrong, right for them or wrong for them? And then one of the challenge with the LGBTQ, which is, and with the law that Uganda passed, for example,
Mhm.
said if you've decided to choose, you've chosen, that is the life you want to live. It's okay, you live that life.
Okay.
But why do I have to? So, for example, think about it. If I come
Mhm,
and then now I have to begin convincing you to become like me
mhm,
in the name of my human rights,
mhm,
am I already not violating your own human right to have the freedom to choose who you want to be and live the life you want to be?
mhm,
And then if I come and then now I want to begin indoctrinating your children
mhm.
and making them be like me, am I already not violating the right of these children and not allowing them make their own choices?
Okay.
You see, all of these are in the dynamics.
Mhm,
But at the end, we just say, no, there's violation of human rights
mhm,
and things like that. And when it comes to matter of morality, it's not about majority.
mhm,
It is what is right. And if the people have spoken, in this case, the people of Uganda have spoken, the people of these different African countries have spoken, that as far as we're concerned as a nation, this is the life, the culture we want to live.
I
Should
have
we
a.
also honor? Wouldn't
Mhm,
it be make sense that we actually also honor and respect them? This is a sovereign country.
okay.
These are people who have, it's not like they have been coerced to say, please do this and do this. This is the voice of the people.
Mhm,
So, should we ignore the rights of the majority, which we say in matter of morality, it's not about this and that, it's what is right and wrong, and culturally, what the culture perceived to be.
okay.
So yes, so there is, unfortunately, because of the stand that Uganda and the president of Uganda has taken in saying now, many people misquote the bill
Mhm,
that was passed. Oh, the Uganda is killing the LGBTQ people. Uganda is doing this. No, there's not killing.
mhm,
This is what the bill is against, and this is what part of what was signed was. It is illegal,
mhm,
assuming I was a gay.
mhm,
It is illegal for me to come
Mm-hmm.
and then begin using money to lure you to begin living like me. That is illegal. If I am living my life, I've chosen this how I want to live. Please, no problem. That's what the bill says. But why do I have to now assume that you who is heterosexual, you are wrong, therefore you should become like me? And then by you taking your stand and saying, no, I'm not going to do that, then you say, I say you are infringing on my rights.
Let me ask you this, because you are speaking from the perspective of a person who identifies an LGBTQ. Now, does this bill also talk about a straight person, like me, for example,
Yeah.
going to a person who is an LGBTQ
Yeah. Yeah.
and tell them, hey, be like me, become straight?
And so
Am I
yes,
committing
yes, yes,
an
yes.
offense if I did that?
So
If it's an offense the other way around?
no, so an offense the other way around is where I use money to lure you. And then, so the biggest focus actually is where you use money to lure children.
Ah,
And then, so that actually cuts across whether it is straight, if you want to use that word, or not, that any act that is performed against children, minors, there is imprisonment for it.
but how about adults? Like if a straight person went to an LGBT person
Yeah.
and tell them, hey, be straight like me.
So at the end, there's nothing wrong with having a conversation.
Okay.
So, for example, if assuming again, just making assumption that I was for you and I to sit, and then you ask me whichever question. So, okay, so how did you become this, and what makes you think this way? There's nothing wrong with sharing ideas, and then you saying, okay, but for me, I'd think it's supposed to be this way.
So if you pay me to be like
But
you,
now, if I begin saying, you know what? There's actually money. If you could become like me, you know, I know these things of poverty and things of this, you know, you could actually become rich. This business you want to start, I could actually fund it for you if. Now there, it's no longer conversations of let's seek to understand each other. Let's seek to.
I understand that. But my question is, how about the other way? Like, for example, I'm a straight person.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a wife and a child. So, but I want to convince, let's say, a friend or a person I just met, and I know this person is gay, or is a lesbian, or whatever. There are many genders. I don't know how many.
It's continuing to grow.
So I want to convince this person to become like me.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe start a family or something. Then I tell them, okay, I'm gonna pay you if you change and become a straight person. Am I committing an offense?
Yes,
under that bill?
you're buying them. You are, because at the end, it shouldn't be, the motivation should be money, because then at that point, for example, this person probably just gonna try and agree with you and accept to do what you're telling to do because you're offering money.
Yeah. Okay.
But then it's actually not really a change that you'd probably hope to see.
Okay.
Yes.
You are a leader in the community, a youth leader, also at the church. You are a leader there. What is the voice of the church on this LGBT issue in Uganda?
Yes. Well,
because I'm asking you this because I've heard that the Pope endorsed it. I think is it the Anglican Church
yes,
in the UK?
Church, yes.
Also supports the LGBT community.
Yeah.
What is the voice of the church in Uganda, or generally in Africa and East Africa?
Yeah. So when it comes to support, as far as does it need to be condoned, and then do we allow it to continue, and then as far as propel it along, no. But you see, there's unfortunately the church has also been misunderstood, and when we talk about support, it is loving the person, okay, and trying to help the person.
Yeah.
Is not the same with supporting what they do.
Yes.
And encouraging them to continue.
So if a couple, maybe let's say two men who identify as a couple, or two ladies,
Yeah.
or I don't know about the queer. I don't know how exactly it is,
Yeah.
but there are so many
It
of
is queer.
these
So
kind
they
of
have not discovered
relationships.
yet. Yes.
So if one of them came to a church that you go to,
Mhm.
and then they said they want to fellowship with you, will do you think the church will accept them and continue fellowshipping with them while they maintain their relationship?
While they so if someone wanted to attend, well, the reality is we've had time where actually people like that have come.
Yeah.
And yes. So you see, the church is like a hospital.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And it's not healthy people who go to the hospital. The
Mhm.
sick people who go to the hospital. People who need help.
Yes.
And so definitely if someone like that came to church,
Mhm.
we're not going to chase them away. But also what we're not going to do is to condone the lifestyle and the behavior.
Mhm.
We're not going to.
So you are not going to tell them, ah, it's okay to be like that.
So just like at church, we say it is wrong and sinful to steal, to kill, to lie, and be immoral, sexual, and all of those.
Mhm.
Biblically, we see this falls within us. So as we talk about what the Bible teaches about all of these things, we will teach the Bible for what it says.
Mhm.
And so just like we would not say, okay, if this person was known to be a thief, that when they come to church, we're not going to say, no, you're a thief, go away.
Mhm.
But also, we're not going to say, it is okay,
Yeah.
you can continue stealing.
Mhm.
If someone was a drug addict dealing with addiction and all of that, when they come to church, we're not going to say, no, you're a drug addict, you can't come here. We're not going to chase them away. But then we're not going to say it is okay. Here are more drugs. Here are more cocaine and
Yeah.
dope and all of that. We're going to try and see how can we help them overcome this. So that's the same approach.